This, I think, is the main issue that drains the player of their motivation to keep going, that makes them put down the controller, sometimes before they even make it to the first town. It has been the source of many complaints during playtesting. Here's why I'm not getting rid of it. You guys playtested my game, so it's time to move on to polishing it. Now, hold on there, bucko. Your game's kind of a turd. Yeah, results were mixed. Many of the issues brought up have an easy fix, but there's one main issue with no clear answer that leaves me dropping warm mounds of despair in my trousers. I don't know how to fix it. Okay, I'll give you an example of an easy fix. The attack minigames are a bit annoying and very unforgiving. It's the same feeling as when you're about to make a sweet dunk, but someone slaps your sweet nugs. So all I did was take a junk stat like luck and have some weapons use this stat in the damage formula. That way you can do damage even if you don't, get any inputs. Voila, problem solved. I also made it so that you have more chances. If you miss an input, you don't lose right away. Here are some approval boxes. They're judging you. 2 X's and the minigame's over. But here's the tougher, throbbing, stringier issue, the dodging minigame. This, I think, is the main issue that drains the player of their motivation to keep going, that makes them put down the controller, sometimes before they even make it to the first town. It has been the source of many complaints during playtesting. Here's why I'm not getting rid of it. My vision for this game is something white-knuckled and occasionally exhilarating, but forgiving. So these minigames usually borrow things from other games that make me feel this way. One Finger Death Punch, this minigame from Superboy, I think it's called, betting your mortgage on the ponies. Put them together and you still don't quite get my minigame, and I'm just realizing why. With One Finger Death Punch, you have agency. You can choose either left or right and how to string attacks along. You have to employ strategy because you can see ahead of you and you get power-ups that can trivialize tougher enemies. You have to be quick and smart, and that's what's so rewarding. You can also expedite how quickly the rounds last if you're fast enough. You're only as impatient as you're not willing to push yourself. This car minigame, while you can't expedite how quickly the minigame can go, allows you to see ahead, and it uses a fake-out enemy to spice things up. This minigame is also sandwiched between 2 other randomized minigames, while a metagame takes place literally behind the scenes. Hell, even the bullet hell minigames in Undertale and Deltarune, despite their variety, could feel annoying because even if you're dodging, you're still at the behest of the enemy. You're still waiting. Toby Fox knew this because he made the least likable monster in the game, Jerry, make the enemy turn last longer if he's in the monster party. Fuck you, Jerry. But the bullet hell minigame worked in spite of that because it had variety. Hell, even in Ocarina of Time, when the game makes you engage in swordplay, a lot of players get impatient because a lot of it is just waiting for the enemy to attack. The Thousand Year Door has minigames that you can't expedite, but they're so varied, and even on the ones that are essentially the same, the reads are so different that it makes up for it. And it's all set against a very strategic backdrop. The solution, then, is variety and/or feeling like an agent. How do I accomplish this? Getting control back in my life. Give me back my dog, Brenda! First and foremost is to keep in mind that this is my first game, and I'm trying to keep it small without sacrificing my vision. Alright, solution time. People said that the enemies were too fast, so I'm gonna remove the downtime.
That seems counterintuitive.
Let me fucking explain something to you. It felt too fast because there was no indication of how much time the player had to react, number 1. Number 2, it felt very inconsistent. Enemies with a lower speed stat than you gave you lots of time to dodge, but strong enemies give you very little time. Nothing in the game indicated this, so I think the issue comes down to this feeling of inconsistency that favored the enemy, because eventually you'd move on to stronger enemies, and the more faster than you are from the enemy, the more time you have to dodge, and the less faster, the less time you have. I wanted to keep it ambiguous because I wanted a level of tension, and instead, it made for a baffling rule set. Yucky. No bueno. Introducing something that's never been seen before in a game. A warning indicator. So that's one problem solved, but now back to that downtime I was mentioning earlier. In the old dodging minigame, downtime had nothing happen. It was dead air with little going on. I thought it would make for interesting pacing like in WarioWare, but it doesn't. So, now that the player can see how much time they have, I'm simply removing it. And now you're allowed to dodge or stand still as quickly as you want. And by stand still, I mean I have a dedicated stand still button. If you're in a safe zone and you press stand still, well, guess what? We move on to the next enemy attack. That means the enemy's turn is only as slow as you make it. Perhaps even player impatience will lead to mastery. As for variety, I don't want to go too gung-ho, so I made one other version. It's a timed version, where there's a conventional timer, where if you don't go through the entire sequence in time, you take the remaining attacks on the chin. That's also why it's so important to get used to using the wait button. But how do I get this across to the player? How do I get them used to using the wait button? AoEs.
Elaborate now.
Enemies now have AoEs that you can't dodge. You have to guard, and waiting is a way to guard against these. The dedicated wait button turns into a guard button. I took out the fakeouts for now. With fakeouts, they worked because the cue that the player was looking out for primarily was which side the enemy shifted to. The fakeout comes with a secondary cue that would warn you if the opposite was true. With this minigame, the primary cue is the warning symbol, not the enemy. At the same time, if the enemy were to move in one direction but the warning symbol moves to the other, it's hard to decide on the fly, even after much repetition, which cue takes precedent. At that point, it feels cheap rather than tricky. So, now that I have all this in place, I tried to playtest my game, and it's hard for me to tell. I'm a super player. I am super player. I had to get some family and friends to give me some feedback, and once that happened, well, I started making this video. And once this video goes live, I have to say, playtests are open once again. Link to the game is in the description. Same with the password. You can play in browser or download the exe. Thank you so much for your time.